In effect, humans have dragged a body with a long hominid history into an overfed, malnourished, sedentary, sunlight deficient, sleep deprived, competitive, inequitable, and socially isolating environment with dire consequences. I can't disagree with that. I don't have a good argument to oppose that. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Hope you're doing well. Happy post-Thanksgiving. The year is almost over. It seems like it hasn't even started. So, well, there that went. Over this Thanksgiving break, I was thinking a lot about family and history and war and Native Americans, and so I decided to read and review Tribe by Sebastian Junger. Let's take care of the coffee lottery really quick. Here we go. Who's going to get a bag of Sargent coffee and a hard copy of Tribe by Sebastian Junger? Connor, thank you very much for donating to the show, Connor. Really appreciate all the help. I love doing this book giveaway thing. It's a lot of fun. I like sending people stuff. I like sending people books and coffee. So if you'd like to get the chance to win some books and coffee, have that sent to you, then please go to patreon.com/books are better than food. You can donate $5 or more per video, and I will place your name in the mason jar, and best of luck to you. Thanks to everybody who supported already. All right, on to the review. So this was a very interesting read, and I'd like to get your input. So please, if you have a moment, stop by in the comments section, talk a little bit about the ideas in the book, if you've read it, and or just give me your thoughts and feedback, because this is something we should all be talking about, I think. This is very important. These issues are very important. I have mixed feelings about a lot of things in this book, and I'm not sure if we're going to get any solid answers, but it's good if we're talking about it, We can learn from one another and each other's experience, which is what this is all about, This was an easy and thought-provoking read with some fascinating anecdotes and some disturbing observations, to say the least. And Junger seems to possess a true altruistic desire to help others discover how to make their lives meaningful, to shine a light on what appears to be a growing sense of alienation in America and the West in general. The giant problem for the West posed by Junger seems to be this: we no longer need each other to survive. Or we don't need to be social in order to survive. We don't need to know each other in order to survive. We need some people, but it's like with this new emerging technology, you can order anything in the world and have it arrive at your doorstep, ready to go within 2 days, maybe even 2 hours, like everything. We don't need to be accountable to anyone. We can live basically almost entirely independent of any other people. We don't even really have to go outside or see anyone on the street if we don't want, It's spooky, really. A considerable amount of the book concerns soldiers missing combat, missing the war, because it brought them together. It strengthened their unity, It created these really tight bonds. Same thing with people during large natural disasters. And deals with veterans returning to this country where they are not integrated back into civilian life in a way where they believe their lives have meaning, or where they feel needed or very useful. The positive effects of war on mental health were first noticed by the great sociologist Emil Durkheim, and I think that might have been from the book Suicide, which I have up here by Durkheim, and I've been meaning to read this for years. I'm going to get around to it. I just haven't got there yet, but I really want to. First noticed by the great sociologist Emil Durkheim, who found that when European countries went to war, suicide rates dropped. Psychiatric wards in Paris were strangely empty during both world wars, and that remained true even as the German army rolled into the city in 1940. Researchers documented a similar phenomenon during civil wars in Spain, Algeria, Lebanon, and Northern Ireland. An Irish psychologist named H.A. Lyons found that suicide rates in Belfast dropped 50% during the riots of 1969 and 1970, and homicide and other violent crimes also went down. Depression rates for both men and women declined abruptly during that period, with men experiencing the most extreme drop in the most violent districts. County Derry, on the other hand, which suffered almost no violence at all, saw male depression rates rise rather than fall. Lyons hypothesized that men in the peaceful areas were depressed because they couldn't help their society by participating in the struggle. When people are actively engaged in a cause, their lives have more purpose, with a resulting improvement in mental health, Lyons wrote in the Journal of Psychomatic Research in 1979. It would be irresponsible to suggest violence as a means of improving mental health, but the Belfast findings suggest that people will feel better psychologically if they have more involvement with their community, right? So in a Joe Rogan podcast, which is where I heard about this book, and I'll link to that in the description box below, Junger says, "The irony about modern society is that it has removed hardship and danger from everyday life. And it's in the face of hardship and danger that people come to understand their value to society. And they get their sense of meaning from that. We live in an era of rapid automation, rapid technological innovation, and poverty worldwide is at its lowest. We're witnessing some sort of unbelievable miracle in the improvement of quality of life for people everywhere. But according to Junger, because of how unnatural that state of comfort is, many of us are going to be very, very miserable. Bluntly put, modern society seems to emphasize extrinsic values over intrinsic ones, and as a result, mental health issues refuse to decline with growing wealth. Mental health issues refuse to decline with growing wealth. The more assimilated a person is into American society, the more likely they are to develop depression during the course of their lifetime, regardless of what ethnicity they are. Mexicans born in the United States are wealthier than Mexicans born in Mexico, but far more likely to suffer from depression. Like corporate lawyers, they may have a harder time achieving the 3 pillars of self-determination: autonomy, competence, and community, and wind up with a higher rate of depression. By contrast, Amish society has an exceedingly low rate of depression because, it is theorized, many Amish remain utterly unassimilated into modern society, to the extent that they won't even drive cars. I saw my first Amish community recently, sort of. I just saw horses and buggies up in Michigan, going along the highways next to all of these speeding cars. I was like, oh, it's amazing. It's like, you just have no idea these cultures in America exist. The economic and marketing forces of modern society have engineered an environment that maximizes consumption at the long-term cost of well-being, a study in the Journal of Affective Disorders concluded in 2012. In effect, humans have dragged a body with a long hominid history into an overfed, malnourished, sedentary, sunlight-deficient, sleep-deprived, competitive, inequitable, and socially isolating environment with dire consequences. I can't disagree with that. I don't have a good argument to oppose that. The alienating effects of wealth and modernity on the human experience start virtually at birth and never let up. Okay. So, I speak with guys who are around my age or a little younger or older who are working and stable, but they're not particularly driven or happy or even engaged with life at all, really. I speak with older men and women and they have empty nest syndrome. Then when they retire, if they're able to retire, there's this sense of boredom, a lack of engagement and depression, and the knowledge that society really doesn't need them anymore. And I know that's really brutal to say. I mean, it's not like society particularly needs me, It's like you have to work to be useful to society now. But I think this is what many people are going to be facing in the coming years. Because way back when, in tribal societies or in tribes now, but in small tribes, you're useful just by being born, right? Just because you mean a tremendous deal to the group for its survival. Just the flesh and blood that you are and the work that you're able to do in these small tribal groups is incredibly meaningful. It's very, very important to the survival and the function of the group as a whole. And if you eliminate that, I mean, if you have like so many people where it's like, you have all this technological innovation where work is automated, you don't need manual labor anymore, then you don't need people. So what happens when you have a whole bunch of unused labor? What happens when you have a lot of pent up potential energy? What happens when you have soldiers with no war? Well, I think we're starting to see it. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it. Because here's the thing about it. The disturbing thing. We don't just relax if there's no problems. We can't just chill. We can't just relax. I mean, like, even me, like I can't even have this Thanksgiving, this Thanksgiving break, I can't even sit down and not do something. I can't even like not read a book or write a review or go online and like try and do something productive I can't do it. That's just a very, very small microcosm of the issues that we're going to face, I think. Because if we don't have any problems, that doesn't mean that everybody just chills and everything's hunky-dory. No, it means that we're going to create them, or we're going to create things to fix, because that's what we do. That's what we're programmed to do. We make problems to solve. We have to feel like we're progressing in some sense. As a friend of mine said, it seems to be a very special person, a very special kind of person who can just sit around and fuck off. We're not really built for it as humans, at all. So I don't necessarily agree with everything in the book. I don't just take it all and just think like, oh yeah, he's got it perfectly right. But this particular issue, I do agree with, absolutely. I think that this is going to cause problems, big ones. It already has. You're already seeing it. You can read about it in the news daily. Perfect example are the mass shootings in America. These giant shootings. Two of the biggest in U.S. history, separated by just over a month. Same season. Not within 6 months of each other. Not within a year. Not within 2. No, within like just over a month. So are those just growing pains? Is it really the dawn of a new era of freedom, autonomy, productivity, and unthinkable utopic comfort? We've lost the tribal values of yore, and thus a vacuum has been created, in the kind of Nietzschean God is dead way. And what is filling that void is not desirable. That's the idea that Junger is positing in his book. Sebastian Junger is a journalist, author, and film director based out of New York City. He wrote The Perfect Storm, which I have not but should have read, and co-directed the documentary Restrepo, which is about American troops fighting in the Korangal Valley, with Tim Hetherington, who was a photojournalist who was killed back in 2011 in the Libyan Civil War. I had an acquaintance who was either stationed in very briefly or passing through the Korangal Valley, which is the place documented in Restrepo, and he said it was like the most terrifying place he'd ever been. Just chaotic. That was about it. Didn't say much on it. So Junger was recently on the Joe Rogan podcast for the second time this year, and both of the podcast episodes are worth your time. They're great. If you're on the fence about reading the book, I would suggest you listen to the last podcast, the most recent one, and you'll definitely know if the book's for you or not. He goes over a lot of the material and a lot of the ideas therein. So, check it out. Now we have the situation where we don't need to answer to anyone, where we're largely spread out and in cities of millions, where we only talk to a handful of people, and the great majority of people we encounter on a day-to-day basis are strangers. Gil Scott-Heron has a great song called New York is Killing Me, and there's a line that goes, yeah, you got 8 million people, and I didn't have a single friend. It's a great song. And it's like, welcome to 2017, amigo. Like, nobody needs you. Living in a place with like 36 million people doesn't guarantee you one single friend, or that you'll be useful to any one of those people. Like, nobody cares. So, and Junger even points that out, living in New York City himself, saying that, the vast majority of people he encounters on a day-to-day basis are strangers, and that only up till very recently in human history was that something that people experienced. I just automatically think taxi driver, and that's like the syndrome. Because what happens when you don't need other people, and when you don't need to answer to other people, and they don't need you, is you become depressed. And so do they. The suicide rate goes up. Nihilistic thinking goes up. The idea of life being one big meaningless nothing spreads like wildfire. Violence goes up, the shootings go up, like real meaningless violence. Not war, not combat between countries, but this kind of bizarre nihilistic self-destruction. People seem to love starting fights on Twitter just because, it's like people start making big deals out of nothing on Twitter, on social media. If there are no problems, then people will create them, because people need to solve problems, to be thought of as problem solvers and useful ones, as useful individuals, having an impact on their social groups, and making a difference to the community in some positive, beneficial way, and being recognized for it to some extent at least. Perhaps the biggest threat to this country will come from ourselves, thinks Junger, unless North Korea drops the big one, of course. But even then, if we entered into World War III, I mean, you might see all of the things that Junger's talking about actually occur. You know, the suicide rate might go down, and then, you know, I mean, mental illness might go down, and everybody might band together, and it might be this giant, in some ways, positive experience. Though, of course, fingers crossed, knock on wood, I would never ever hope for that in 1,000 years. But you know, so that's the trouble with all these things. Like, if this is true, well, okay, that doesn't mean that war is good, or that you know, all of this catastrophic violence is desirable. It's not. It's certainly not. And Junger is not saying that, but he is pointing out some disturbing studies. You know, Native Americans are brought up in the book frequently as an example of cultures and societies that flourished or successfully functioned in alternative ways to the whites. You know, actually in the podcast with Rogan, he mentions they actually had better nutrition than the whites. This isn't to say that they also weren't capable of outrageous acts of violence. They certainly were. But here's the interesting thing. While there are many examples of whites running off to join the tribes, like basically like running into the woods and never being seen or heard from again, and white people who, after having been captured by the tribes, were rescued and then turned around and went running back to the tribes, like Ben Franklin states in this quote in the book, "When an Indian child has been brought up among us, taught our language, and habituated to our customs," Benjamin Franklin wrote to a friend in 1753, "yet if he goes to see his relations and make one Indian ramble with them, there is no persuading him ever to return." On the other hand, Franklin continued, white captives who were liberated from the Indians were almost impossible to keep at home. Though ransomed by their friends and treated with all imaginable tenderness to prevail with them to stay among the English, yet in a short time they become disgusted with our manner of life, and take the first good opportunity of escaping again into the woods. Very interesting. If you haven't seen Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man, I highly recommend you go and watch it right now. Right now. On the flip side, you know, I feel like if I were to complain, it would just be all first world problems. You know, I really can't complain at all. I'm very grateful for all of these technological innovations and benefits, and for the place I live in right now, you know, with the you know, the healthcare and the amount of food and everything. You know, it's like when your biggest challenge is not to eat delicious food, you know, it's like in abundant quantities, because it's all around you. I mean, you know, that's kind of a good sign, I think. I just feel like I would be making something out of nothing, you know? We are designed, we evolved to live in groups of 30 to 40 people in a harsh environment, totally interreliant on one another for survival. That's what he said in the podcast interview. But it's like, yeah, all right, but do I really want to go do that? Do I really want to go back to that? No. His idea is that there is an imbalance in our self-serving culture, wherein it's too selfish and there's not enough sacrifice, there's not enough responsibility being taken. And in part, at least, it seems like he's blaming capitalism for this, which I don't buy. No pun intended. While it certainly seems there is something wrong with bailing out the banks, which he discusses in the book, I'm not sure we can just throw out the system that has allowed for the growth it has in favor of a simpler tribal life. Which is not what he's saying. He's not saying, you know, let's all go back to tribal warfare. But when he is putting forth the idea that we may have a giant problem, that the collapse of our society very well could be through contempt for each other politically and alienation leading to self-destruction, then yeah, I'm listening. You know, I think that's really, that sounds perfectly coherent and logical to me. I mean, it certainly seems to be heading in that direction in some ways. So, you know, I'm paying attention. And maybe you should too. Maybe you should check it out. So again, I'm not saying that Junger wants to throw everything out and start over again with tribal societies. You know, do I want to give up my books, film, music, pour over coffee, and Amazon Prime subscription to go back and hang out with 30 or 40 people who I'm totally responsible for and who are totally responsible for me, and it's life or death every day, and I don't know if I'm going to eat? You know, hell no. No, not in 1,000 years. Of course not. But are there things about this book that we should pay attention to and incorporate moving forward, you know, where we recognize the importance of social activity, of responsibility, of self-sacrifice to a group, for a cause, to feel meaningful, to feel like in our feet, in our bodies, because that's what's happened for, like, you know, hundreds, thousands of years all around the world, and in every culture, you know, so that we have, so that you can achieve some sort of balance in your life, some sort of you know, positive mental health. That, yeah, you know, pay attention to that. Yes, I'm suggesting you pay attention to those things. You know, it's kind of like Jordan Peterson with Christianity. There are elements in there that are really, really important. You shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, basically. I'm not telling you how to live your life or anything like that. I'm just, you know, these are things to think about. While I enjoyed it, I do think Tribe is too short and lacking in deeper analysis for its, you know, its enormous declarations in some cases. It doesn't include many strong counter arguments to strengthen its own. And I'm going to link to a particularly critical review in the description box below, you know, just so you can have a couple of different points of view. More than anything, Junger seems to be asking questions but unsure himself of the answers, which is fine. Often with this channel, I'm doing the exact same thing. So, but what do you think? What do you think about it? What do you think of those ideas? Or what did you think of the book if you read it? Let me know in the comments section below. There are many things in this book worth considering that I'll be struggling to understand in the coming years, you know, maybe for the rest of my life. And I'm sure I won't be alone in the years to follow with all this stuff that's happening around us. How anybody can be bored right now is a mystery to me, a serious, true mystery. I'm just like, things here in America, it seems, are about to get even weirder. So here we are, happy holidays. That's where we find ourselves, all in this cyclone together, wondering what the hell it's all about, man. Tribe by Sebastian Junger, better than food. Thanks so much for watching, really appreciate it. This holiday season, always remember life is far too short to read bullshit. Again, if you'd like to get in on the book and coffee lottery, you can head over to patreon.com/books are better than food and donate $5 or more per video. Would really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who's supported so far, of course. And if you could hit the thumbs up, beat the shit out of it on Facebook, and subscribe if you have not already, please. I think it'd be definitely worth your time. You can hit me up on Twitter and Instagram as well. I still also read material and provide feedback or criticism for a fee. I charge $50 an hour, and you can hit me up at booksarbetterthanfood@gmail.com, and we'll work something out, you know? And I'm flexible too. I'm not an unreasonable man. Yeah, if you have a novel or a short story or poetry or an essay or something, and you'd like to hear my thoughts, or you want some feedback or something, then yeah, hit me up. One more recommendation, hot yoga, I have to say. Started that up recently, that's awesome. I don't know if I've talked about that at all, but that's an amazing, man, that just helps with so much shit. Thank you very much for watching, take care of yourselves, have a great night. Talk to you soon, ciao.